Hi everybody, welcome to week 7 of Advanced Programming with Java here at Portland State. There was no one at office hours tonight, and seriously, I was like, is it Wednesday? Is it the wrong day? There's like one of those things, it's like, oh my gosh, did I miss the final exam? It's like, I'm a professor, I don't have the final exam. No, that's next week. So anyway, hey, thanks for coming, the brave few who have. I appreciate the participation. As I hinted at on Slack, I don't have like any new content for tonight, but I want to make sure that all of you have what you need to complete Project 5. So there might be a lot to talk about tonight. There might not be much to talk about tonight. So we'll see how it goes. But first, let's start off with Prime Minister's questions. What can I tell you about what we've been doing lately in class?
So for the final exam?
Final exam, yes.
Yeah, we will cover all the material we have in the quizzes from the beginning of the term.
Yeah, so the final exam, okay, it's next week during class time. The final exam covers everything that, certainly everything that is in the projects. I'm not going to expect you to memorize every slide. Stuff on dependency injection isn't going to be on there. But really the stuff that you encountered in your projects will be. There are 2 parts to the final exam. The first part is a written part. It's like the quizzes. There are short answer questions about doing stuff with Java. The second part is an oral part. And so make sure that you're ready to talk. Yep. Don't worry, I do it every year. No one's like, it's okay.
Are we going to stand up in front of everybody?
You will not be doing that. So this is not a recitation. Nope, I'm the only one who has to stand up in front of people.
Will we just like walk over to you and like say something?
They will not be in front of nope.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I won't. It's okay.
How should we best prepare for this?
Okay, the best way to prepare for the final exam is here's the thing. The final exam is worth like what, 12, 16 points? It's not 12, right? 12 points. And so then compared to your final project, that's smaller. Compared to the other work, that's smaller also. So don't. So if you have to choose between investing a lot in the final exam, investing a lot in your project, invest in the project, you'll get a better return on that investment. But what I recommend that you prepare is just look over the notes. So remind yourselves of what happened in the first couple of weeks of the class in terms of the content that we covered. Maybe review the quizzes. And I've found in the past that students that did well on the projects did well on the quizzes because they understood the material and know how to explain it. Sorry, on the final, did well on the projects, do well on the final exam because they know the content, know how to explain it. Okay. Yeah.
I know you mentioned this before, but I just want to confirm it's open.
It's open note, but not open computer, not open phone. So no technology, please, right?
So you bring in any number of printout.
You can print out the lecture notes. You can take notes and highlight things. Printing out the quizzes won't help, so don't bother doing that. But there have been some times where it's like I've been in class working at the final exams, like that was one of the quiz questions. Funny. But no, I don't do that. Okay. How is the Android project going on? I'm really curious to hear what you guys had to say about it. You started it, right? Okay, good.
I had to read a lot of documentation and Google a lot of stuff.
Okay. What are some of the topics that you read up on more? Things that obviously point to a gap in what I covered here.
Well, the linear list or whatever you use in your examples is deprecated. So the relative layouts, linear layout is deprecated. The relative layout is what we should use. And understanding how the adapters and the holders and the keywords work and all that stuff. That was a little bit.
Okay, so
small
adapters.
issues like creating a background activity that doesn't need a nav bar built in, like stuff like that.
Okay.
Small things that go through.
Cool. Okay, so things that sort of startup costs, so navigation. Okay, nice. What else have people learned? Like, what are some of the things that you learned this week that you wish you had known last week? Nothing. Compared to Project 4, which is easier, Project 4, Project 5.
Conceptually, probably Project 5.
I think Project 5 is easier, straightforward. So, well, I'm sorry, what is that?
Conceptually.
Oh, conceptually, Project 5. Okay. Well, oh yeah, right. Probably more familiar with like building a phone app than you are a REST API. Oh,
Well,
that's
it's more
fair.
like it's more like a framework too, where it's like you just kind of like have to watch a tutorial on how to do exactly what you want to do and then do it.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's sort of yes, there's more there, but it's more approachable and easier to learn because there's such great resources online. Yep. That's good.
How
What's wrong
much
with
work should we put into the buttons? Because it sounds like you were doing a lot of research on buttons, and I was like, I haven't actually made my buttons look pretty at all.
Pretty is not where you should be investing. So I mean, for me, sort of the baseline is it's got to work, and it's got to be understandable, but it doesn't need to be pretty. So I guess you don't need to have lots of colors or rounded corners on things as long as it's intelligible enough and sort of works the way. Well, I don't expect it to. So then I don't know. You got something that looks like fields, and next to the field you have a label that says start date. Oh, great! I can enter the start date there. Doesn't need to be all nice and colorful. So yesterday on Slack, I posed the question, "What do you want to do tonight?" And I had a couple people chime in with, let's see here. Let me just bring up Slack here. Oops.
Oh, I had a question about.
Yeah.
So I think in the last instructions for this assignment, I think you were talking about how you tested it, and one of the things was like if you're suddenly to like switch to another application, you should be able to switch back, and it should work. And so I guess I was thinking like, originally I was thinking that would be like, oh, that'd be like the appointments or the appointment books, but then now I'm kind of just like writing everything to file.
Mhm.
So I was like, what? Like I know you kind of showed up, you went through with us a little bit of those different like, like on create and on
Yeah, the life cycle and stuff like that. Yep.
Yeah, but then I was like, well, what am I really supposed to be saving in between? If I'm writing everything to file, like that's just for the local variables, right? So would that just be things like, all I really need? So I was wondering, like, what do I need to worry about going away when I switch to different apps? Would that just be like if you type in like have an appointment and then like don't hit submit and then like go to another appointment? Should that still be there, or do you not care?
Well, probably switch applications, I'd want it, but if I kill the application, no, that kind of UI state shouldn't be restored. It should be persistence left saved. So,
So what do you want to be persistent? Is that just like the appointment book?
the appointment books, yeah, any data has been created. So yeah, if I go through and I guess it's appointment books, right? If I create an appointment book or appointments in the appointment book, once you hit save or whatever, it should be written.
Okay.
And so then that should outlive the app itself. In terms of any sort of in progress state, it should reasonably survive. Hitting the square button, going to another app, and coming back.
Okay, but then just like going a little further.
Yeah.
Like, let's say I enter an appointment, but I screw it up, and then is it okay just to like throw out that like bad? Because like right now, it's like if you mess up, it like goes to a screen that says like you messed up, and then you just have to go to the beginning and start again, create a new appointment. You don't care, like it's not like I have to like you can go back and edit the thing that you messed up on. Or...
It would be nice if it doesn't let you go to another screen if there's something bad there. Right? Now that's sort of like probably a little bonus. So I'm not gonna. I might take off a little bit because honestly, I mean, there's going to be probably like 40 or 50 submissions for me to grade, and boy, if I get like all the way after doing all this data input only to find out it's like, oh look, you missed a character here or whatever, I'll be grumpy. And Grumpy Dave doesn't give good grades, so it's in your own best interest to make it usable. Now that being said, I think you're right. You'll have to determine how much you want to invest in like error checking and error messages and things like that. But I think a good guideline is Don't make me think too hard, and don't make me waste time. Me being the user, of course, but I'm the user, right?
Alright, so if an appointment has a parameter that's bad or not a required parameter, an error message is not sufficient and let them restart the process? You should
Well,
be able to just modify the
It would be not, well, I mean, let's say, hey, you're entering a date, and I somehow choose a bad date, or what do? We do date validation, and then just for completeness and stuff. So, for instance, let's say I forget to enter in an end date. If I then click, submit or create or whatever you do there, if it then goes to a different screen and then says, oh wait, you forgot something on the previous screen, and then you go back to the previous screen and everything's blank again, don't type in all the dates again. That's no fun. So that would be ideal, because that doesn't let you go to the next screen if some piece of data is invalid. Yeah.
I ran into this problem with mine where if you hit enter at the very end, it'll automatically act like it's hitting the submit button.
Yeah.
And then when you have an invalid date or something, the snack bar or whatever I put is behind where you hit enter. So
Weird.
it's and it's hard to get back even if you tap on the screen. It won't. You can't ever see the error message, and it just seems silly to put up a whole error message a word.
Yeah, I mean, so then, yeah, it's unfortunate you can't see the error message. It might be that, hey, there are other options like turning the border red or something of the text input if it's bad. Maybe something to experiment with, but again, probably don't want to spend 6 hours trying to get that to work.
Is your snack bar behind the navigation bar?
It's behind, so when you click on each thing, it's for the date, you'll get the right numbers to type in the date.
Yeah.
And at the last one is a radio button for AM, PM or something. But it's just if you hit enter, that thing just stays there and it submits. And the snack bar that pops up is actually it says in the documents that the snack bar should be on top of everything.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Huh. I wonder if that's I wonder if that's indicative of how you've launched the snack bar. With a snack bar, I've been using Toasts. With a snack bar, do you give some component as attached to or something? I just don't know.
Sorry, I had a problem with structure on top of each other, and I kept adding things.
It says that it should be on top. It's just
See here, Android snack
and then it's
bar.
Maybe I'll try Toast.
Yeah, it looks like you give it a widget, and so then maybe, it's relevant. It's relative to that. Oh yeah, content. Yeah, context view. Yeah, you give it. Yeah, snack bars are relative to a widget, so maybe just the widget that you're associating with isn't the right one.
I'm giving it the view, if I give it the parent.
Yeah, or maybe.
View of what it's in.
Yeah, that's kind of why I like Toasts. They're a little bit easier. So, Toast overview. So yeah, for the error messages that I've been using, Toasts are kind of nice, but they're really, it's really for 3 or 4 words. It's a really small amount of text. So
What's the other thing called again?
snack bar.
That's for error messages as well.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with snack bars. I really don't know when to use each.
Change the location on the screen of the snack bar. So if you want it to come up in the middle or at the top or something like that.
Okay. Oh.
I thought it had to start at the bottom. I saw where people were making it move on the screen.
Yeah, they're gonna get anchoring a snack bar. By default, it will be anchored to the bottom edge of the parent view, but you can use set anchor to put it above a specific view. So maybe there's I see. Toasts are meant to be used for system level notifications. Okay, something happens in the background or whatever. Poof, there it is. Okay, well, this says that snack bars are generally preferred because they can be, yeah, okay, so they can be displayed anywhere. Yeah, so I don't know. Actually, I mean, yeah, I can see why having you want your error message to be contextual. You want to be able to know, oh, this is the thing that was in error. But on the other hand, if you can't see it, because it's in the wrong place. So yeah, experimentation, learning, neat.
I have a
Yeah.
question. Is it okay to just say to take off the extends abstract appointment for your professor?
Right. So the question is, do we still need all those abstract classes that were so helpful in projects 1 through 4? You don't, and I'm not going to look at your code. And so then, yeah, it's a little weird trying to get everything to work with my jar files. And I had to go and lower the bytecode level so it would work with Android and stuff. So no, your stuff will all work without it, and so yeah.
I took
So
it
it's okay.
off. I was like, I can just take this off. And I was like, wait, I could have always done that.
You could have always done it. Spoiler alert. You've learned the lesson in the class. No, but I think all that, great stuff you learned about generics and implementing abstract classes and stuff. It's all part of the lesson now. Yeah, would have been
It's
so
like when
much
you
easier.
take the fence away from the prisoner, but still don't leave.
Exactly. It's like Stockholm syndrome, but you're not in Stockholm. Okay. What do you want to learn tonight? What can I help you determine? Are there things you want to see? Are there topics you want to dive into? How do you want to use our time together tonight?
Was there any difference in Android testing? Like doing you do unit testing on the business logic, but do you do any UI testing?
Yeah, actually. So yeah, we can talk about Android testing. Do you want to start there, or is there someplace else you
Well,
want to start?
I saw when it already generates a little sample unit test, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. But I was also wondering, I don't know, for IT testing, is there a way to test it without clicking on things dozens and dozens of times?
Yeah, there's this whole Espresso framework and everything. We can play with that if you'd like. Yep. Yeah. Want to explore that a little bit? Sure. So yeah, someone asked on the on Slack, hey, can I? Oh, no, I don't want to decompile. Why is it always telling me? I must have had some things that were open. Asked about getting things to work with my classes. Well, as we just learned, you don't have to do that. So it's probably just easiest if you get rid of all of the abstract superclasses and stuff that were for the first couple of projects. Yeah.
I thought it was pretty easy to just use your XML or some of the variables.
Okay, so you added my stuff to the class path, my jar to the class path, and my Maven repository and stuff.
Future reference if you're trying to get people started.
Yeah, one of the things that, because when I thought about this, Android Studio lets you create a project so nicely, and it's all there and it all works, and so I was like, let's start with that. But then, unlike the archetype, where I could get everything all ready for you guys, I don't know how to. There isn't a Gradle archetype that I'm aware of. So yeah, I need to figure that out. Oops, it's getting small. Okay. Testing. Want to learn how to test Android stuff? All right. So let's see here. I think I was just looking at that here. So someone pointed at this, the fundamentals of testing page here in Android. Is there any way to hide this navigation bar over here? No. That's unfortunate. Oh, there's no what is that? No, that's not what I want. Okay. Doesn't look so good. Okay. Anyway, so this page was kind of a neat read. It's kind of stuff that I think we've already talked about in terms of how to test your code, the importance of testing, and how your code can be factored in a way such that it's easier to test, et cetera, et cetera. They talked about how in Android Studio, and I'm just going to go back and forth here. I guess I should open this back for all. Let's see here. They provide, yes, source Okay, they have test and they have Android tests. So Android tests are like oops. Interesting, are out of date. Apparently, they're using old APIs. Android tests are integration tests, and what they do is, they talk about in these docs that there are there's sort of like big expensive tests that could even run on a device, right? I mean, you can go and build your application, deploy it to an actual physical device, and you can drive it that way. And then there are also, you can run it in an emulator. But these are big and expensive. These will take minutes, if not hours, depending on the number of tests you have to run. And you don't want to do that. Instead, what you want to do is exercise as much of your UI in quickly running tests. And so then, ideally, just having unit tests is the best way to go. And that's for the logic. And there are ways to structure your if your Android application has a lot of logic in it, especially close to the UI, you should probably refactor it out into classes that can be tested independently of the UI. And so then definitely have unit tests inside your inside your Android project. Probably the more interesting ones are these. They're calling them instrument tests, which is funny. But the integration tests, the bigger tests, and those all live in the Android test directory. And you keep them in different directories because the Android test will need extra or a different kind of setup, potentially different libraries on the class path, and so they really make them distinguished from the unit tests. Just the same way that in the Maven projects you have the source IT Java for your integration tests. Well, they're called Android test by Android Studio. So as I was saying, you want to make various trade-offs and stuff. Now, remember in Project 4 when we had those unit tests for the servlet, and I used the mock objects, right? I used that Mockito library to make like the fake HTTP servlet request or the mock HTTP servlet request that behaved in just the right way. That gets the job done, and that's cool, especially when you're working with very standard, very stable APIs. But it's also a lot of work. It's also kind of fragile because it really couples the implementation of the test and the implementation of the code under test. And so then most of the time they say, well, you probably shouldn't use all of these mock objects, all of these test doubles. Instead, you should use other things that they talk about. But they do say, hey, listen, it's okay to use. It's okay to use mocks when it's things that are hard to use in the real world, like SQL queries and other stuff like that. I think what the most interesting thing, they talk about small, medium, large tests. So basically, unit tests are small, so have lots of those. They have this testing pyramid. So lots of unit tests, some integration tests, which are your medium tests. They look off to them. And then large tests are really the end-to-end tests, and that's where you're working with multiple activities, and you're sort of doing a big swath of, or rather, a broad swath of functionality within your app.
Is there a name for those types of tests? Are they behavior tests or something like that?
They're really talking about the duration of the test. So small tests run quick. That's why you want to have a lot of them. Medium tests do more and run a little bit slower, and then and so you want more of those, but not a super ton. And large tests are probably the longest running ones. You only want a few of them, but they end up they end up validating the fundamental functionality. So not edge cases, not little details of the UI, but really like the most important things. So do they have names? I think I would consider medium and large tests most likely integration tests because it's not just a single class or a single activity under test. I don't know if they then call it something else. So you could maybe watch this TDD on Android session to see what what terminology they use. So anyway, they talk about unit tests, the small tests, and this is just standard stuff. So I don't know. They have. I'm not familiar with all of these frameworks like Roboelectric. I don't even know what that gives you. But one of the challenging things with really any user interface is providing an environment in which you can test stuff. Well, one of the challenges with user interface testing is that so much of UI code is asynchronous. Right? We talked about this in the last couple of weeks, where in your command line project, it starts at main, it does some stuff, returns, comes back. It's all one thread. Everything sort of has a beginning and has an end. But UIs are inherently asynchronous because they sit there waiting for a user to interact with it, and they react to those interactions accordingly. And as a result, many attempts to write tests for UIs end up having a lot of race conditions because it's like, well, I go perform this operation and I'm not sure if it's done yet. Oh, are you done yet? Oh, we're done. Now you're done. Now I'll check your results. And it ends up being really difficult to express that nicely in code, and then also difficult to get it to run consistently, depending on here again all this asynchrony in your system. Android has a pretty nice solution for that in the Espresso framework, and we'll talk about that as we talk about tests. So anyway, there's sort of like plain old unit tests. There's instrumented tests, and so these are tests that run either in an emulator or in actually on a device. And that's sort of running in a real environment. So you've got the main thread where all the work happens. It's the same main thread that when your app runs for real. So this is the thing that handles all of your events and does all of that work. They also run an instrumentation thread in the background, and that's where your test code lives. And so then you have to again sort of worry about the asynchrony of your tests. Interesting. So let's see here. So then the medium tests are integration tests in that they deal with multiple activities, multiple parts of your application. And here is where you end up doing more complex things that again deal with. We didn't really talk about fragments. Fragments are a chunk of your UI, so not the entire UI for your activity, but just sort of a part of it. If you're doing more advanced things with like data access objects or view models, these medium-sized integration tests will handle all of that. I think kind of where I want to talk about. Well, I think the most interesting thing for us would be working with Espresso, and so I wanted to go to that. Oops, I had this. Okay, so let's go find Espresso. So there's this library. So remember how we learned about like Hamcrest and how it's got those matchers and how it has those assert methods like assert equals and assert that, and then you have the things. Espresso is kind of like that in that what you end up with is relatively readable tests that then sort of provide this layer over what's really happening. I think the interesting thing here is that what Espresso takes care of, and I think the real benefit of it, is that it interacts with the UI for you, and you don't need to worry about asynchrony. It knows it's got its fingers into the tendrils of the Android runtime or parts of the Android runtime. So it knows when like all the events have been captured. All events have been handled. It knows when your UI quiets down from handling things, and then you can interrogate it safely without having to worry about asynchronous things happen. So I really wish I could get rid of that left bar. I'll make it a little smaller so we can see it, see the whole thing. So here is an example of an Espresso test. So it looks like a unit test is annotated with an @test. And what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to get a view, so a widget, and you can say, hey, give me the view whose ID is r.id.getField, and I'm going to type some text into it. And so perform will do something to that view, and here what you're doing is you're typing some text. And then you'll go find the ID button and click it. And then you'll go find some widget that has the text, hello Steve, and make sure that it is displayed. So this is kind of interesting. This is instead of operating directly on your UI, there's a lot of interrogation here, but by expressing your test this way, again, you sort of declaratively say what you want to be true, and then you let the Espresso test handle all the interactions with your UI. I'm gonna do a check. Is this interesting? Is this what you want to learn more about? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Feel free to vote with your feet. If there's no one left, then I can go home. No. Okay. So here again, it's a relatively compact API for interacting with your UI, and then here again, performing actions on it and then validating that. So you perform actions with the perform method, you validate with the check method to make sure that things display as you expect.
Do you have Firefox by chance?
Do I have Firefox? I don't know.
If you could copy that link and get rid of the sidebar for Firefox.
I don't. Okay. Thank you. Actually, I could just. I want to be really hokey about this. Suppose. I don't know. Can I do this? That's dumb. Anyway, but it works. I'll make it a little bigger. Gotta do it again. Yeah. Thank you. So Espresso. This is meant for. This is meant to be written by people who are familiar with the code. So this is white box testing. This isn't black box testing, meaning that you know how the implementation works, and so you'll interact with it that way. So here again. So this onView method, what it does is it waits for the UI to quiet down, I call it. So the whole idea is that you say, hey, give me that view, and the onView method will return once the message queue is empty, meaning that there's no other events to process, so clicks and stuff like that. Async tasks, if they're off running in the background, they've quieted down. And then I guess there's also this idling resources thing. Wait for them to quiet down. And so then this is nice, which means that sort of everything is quiet. There's no other stuff running in the background. And so then you'll have more reliable and dependable test results, which is cool. I don't think I need to go into these details. So there's lots of libraries for doing things like interacting with some of the externally contributed libraries. If you're working with multi-process, I guess you can work with that too, which is, this is super cool. This is great. It gives you a lot of power to be able to write tests. Okay, so how much do I want to find the, I want to find the API to actually look at it. Well, actually, maybe we should look at some recipes first. Okay, so actually, let's see if we can write one. We'll create a new class, and we'll call it first Espresso Test. Actually, I don't know if my environment's set up for this. So maybe we should go to the next step, which is setting things up. So we need to put some stuff in the build.gradle. I don't know if we have that already, so we will look for make everything big. Look for the build.gradle for the app. And yeah, we've got Espresso Core and Test Runner. Is there anything else we need? Test Runner. Oh, we need rules. So we'll add this too. So as you probably figured out, the build.gradle, these Gradle files are like the Maven POM, right? This is all of the build configuration that where you describe and configure your application to be built. See here, to add the same blah blah blah. Oh, okay, I'm going to set the instrument runner. So in Android, so add to the same Well, the following line, Android.default config. Oh, looks like it's already there. Android X test runner, Android Unit test runner. Okay, nice. So there it is. Oh, interesting. So it doesn't have. This is funny. So basically, every time you run your Espresso test, it sends a little ping back to the mothership saying, "Oh, hey, I'm running this version of Espresso," so they know what version of Espresso is being used. And I take them at their word. That's all they send back. If you don't want to send back any data, you can disable the analytics like that. That's kind of cool. Okay, so here is the first test. I'm just going to copy. Actually, wait. Let's copy that with this. So let's do this, and then first Espresso test. Oops. So anyway, lots of stuff to import. Ooh, lots of stuff to import. Doesn't look like here. I think package statement. Oh yeah, I forgot my package statement. Can I just add the package statement? Set package name to that. Good. Activity test rule. Doesn't look like there. Oh, interesting. I wonder what the activity test rule is. Android support. So what package? I bet it's in that rules. I bet I know what I need to do. I think I need to synchronize my. It said project synchronized.
Maybe clean and rebuild.
Yeah, that's probably it. It's probably just out of date. Oh wait, Grail files have changed. Sync now. Yes. No, found it. Good. Don't need that anymore. Okay, let's take a look at this. So, what is this? This is a well, it's a JUnit test. This run with is an annotation that comes from JUnit. So JUnit has this thing called test runners. I don't remember if I mentioned this in the notes or not. This is basically something that will do a whole bunch of setup before the test, and so then the JUnit framework provides a way of plugging into all the test running mechanism, and so Android provides a JUnit test runner called Android JUnit 4. I guess it's deprecated. I don't know what we're supposed to replace it with. That will set up all of the Android running stuff. Android provides a large test annotation. This is nice, so it allows you to identify which of your tests are these large, long-running tests or potentially long-running tests, so that you can run them accordingly. So you've got your test class. You use something called a JUnit rule. I'm not exactly too sure what this is. It has something to do with setup, I guess. And so then, basically, what this is doing is telling the Espresso framework that, oh, hey, the activity that we're working with is the main activity, and this is our main activity, the main activity here in this project. Finally, you've got the test. Now, this test is going to fail because I don't have a hello world. Hello world button. I just want to see how it goes though, so we'll run it. So it's deploying it to a device. In this case, starts it up. And it's running it. Can you see what's going on down here? Oh, there it is. It's doing its thing. It's running the test. IntelliJ knows it's running a test, and aha, it failed with a big old message. So no views in the hierarchy found matching text is with hello world. Well, that is true. Because I don't have anything called hello world. Still the emulator up? Oh, it went away now. Let's go back and look at the main activity and see if we can make this thing pass. Don't remember what's in my own UI anymore. Let's see here. Well, there's a button called Click Me. So let's see if we can get that button and say that it is displayed. Oops. That was interesting. It was all uppercase. So Click Me button is displayed. So I'll run it again. Yes. So it didn't need to redeploy it again, which was nice because it would have taken a long time. And now it is failing. So Click Me. I wonder if it needs to be all caps because, oops. Try all caps because it's all caps. Yep, it passed. So this is kind of neat. What does this do? It says, okay, hey, get me a view, and it's kind of hard to read, but it's actually, it returns something called a view interaction, which is an Espresso object that lets you interact with a view. And what view do I want? Well, give me the view that has the text "Click Me." And so then it's smart enough to go through. I'll get the app up here again. So this test, Espresso is smart enough to go through your UI and identify a view that has text "Click Me." And so this is, in this case, it's a button, but it could also be a text field or whatever. And so then it gets, so then this onView method returns this object that lets you then manipulate it. And so then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I'm going to validate something about that view. I'm going to check that it is displayed. So matches is, what does this return? A view assertion. Okay. That then takes something which is, okay, a certain kind of matcher, and there's a built-in thing that creates a matcher that says whether or not it's displayed. So it's a lot like Hamcrest, in that you've got this notion of these matchers that either find certain things about an object or let you assert certain properties of an object. So, still interesting? Maybe a little bit? Okay. What would be another good test to write? Yeah.
It'd be like entering some information and sending it, like so we can make that, like for instance, entering an appointment, so you don't have to like manually do it every time.
Oh, right, cool. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I guess maybe we could experiment with to see what it's like to try to do test-driven development with Espresso. I think it might be kind of a slow turnaround time, but let's see what we can do.
Like you could automate the double above number. Try that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the weird thing, actually, I don't know if you guys see what I did here. So, like, I wanted to learn how to launch other activities. So, like, when you click double number above, it creates, like, a different activity that, like, doubles it and then sends the result back and displays it. Yeah, I wonder how we launch an activity with Espresso. Oh, let's go find out. I'm going to close the emulator. Espresso, let's see here, Intents maybe? Oh, right, here's, yeah, okay, I think I saw how to do this. So this is kind of cool. Okay, I didn't talk about this before, so let me just spend a couple minutes looking at the code first. So, I wanted to learn about intents, and so then again, I just as an example, I say, great, I'll have another activity that takes a number and doubles it. Okay, so how do you send data to an activity, and how do you get data back from an activity? So let me look at the XML again. Let's go to the text. So I have an edit text here, which takes a number. I'll just run the app. And so I've got it up. Should have closed the emulator. So I added an edit text up here, which takes a number. And that's called number. And then I also added a button, which doubles a number. And I think those are the only two interesting things, yeah, that I've got there. So now in my activity, when I oh, that's interesting. Collapsed it. Oh, sorry, I guess one more thing. So when the button is clicked, on click, you call this double number method. So this double number method is invoked. It goes out and it gets the edit text for the number to double. It converts it into a string. And actually, I think here's an example of how you can use a toast. So if I try to, oh, no, it won't. Okay, it won't let me have a bad number. That's a bummer. Okay, so I guess you're not. I was hoping to be able to demonstrate the toast. So I go and I get the number. I parse the number into an int, and then I'm going to launch another activity. So the way I do that is I use the intent. Right, we talked about that on the first day we talked about Android. So the whole idea is an intent is again this sort of like request to go do something. Now in this case, we talked about implicit intents and explicit intents. This is an explicit intent in that we specify here is the activity, the specific activity, this double number activity to launch. Now, intents take several parameters. There's something that describes the action. I'm going to use the built-in view action. It has a URI, which there was a little bit of discussion about this on the on Slack. And actually, I'm going to try it with null and see what happens.
Do you have to do the put? Like, do you have to pass the intent with everything that you're going to extract from it on the other side?
Well, you do need to put everything. Well, you need to give it enough information so it knows what to do. So, for instance, this is kind of a wonky example because it's like passed through. More likely, you would be saying, "Hey, go display, this email," and you give it an ID for the email, or maybe in your case, display this appointment or this appointment book. And so that's where you would use the URI, because the URI is really meant to identify like sort of the piece of data that it is acting on. So the action view or the action edit or whatever. So that's probably how you do it for real. Because I was passing through a number and I was curious about put extra and how it worked, I used put extra.
Oh, okay. But so I guess I'm wondering, like, if you did put extra, and then on the other side you say like get whatever, get extra, and you can get the number, and then do whatever you want with
That's
it.
exactly what. Yeah, I'll show that in a
But
minute.
if
Yep.
you don't put extra, can you not use that number at all? Like, it's like
Well, this is not passed, right? I mean, you need to pass the data that the target intent needs.
Got it.
So the target activity needs the receiver of the intent.
So the URI is what is that object? One more time.
It is. You can think of it like a URL. I mean, it's what identifies the data that you're acting upon. And so, for instance, it's kind of probably hard to read from here. I'll debug it, and we can see what it actually looks like in real time. So you create this intent that says view view a piece of data in this other activity, and that's a double number activity. And then we're going to put some extra information in it. There's a little payload there with the number, and then we're going to say start activity for result. What start activity for result does is it will fire off the activity, but then also knows to keep track of it based on this, it's kind of strange. It takes an intent that you go and start, and then also a request code, which is an identifier for the intent that you launch. And then we'll see when it, well, actually, we'll see down here, I guess. This onActivityResult method is then called whenever an activity that was launched from one activity, the launched one finishes, and then the payload, the resulting payload is delivered back to this onActivityResult method.
So isn't it when you put it in, when you put extra, the string number is some kind of a, like, it's some kind of
It's an identifier. Yeah, these are just name value pairs.
So you can name that string whatever you want, but
Yep.
typically you would name it the same thing as whatever.
No, you would name it whatever it ought to be.
Okay.
So, appointment begin date, maybe, although I wouldn't really recommend doing it that way. So there are better ways to pass information between them. But yeah, so then over in your double number activity, the activity that's being launched, when this thing is created, we go get its UI and everything. And then we call get intent to figure out the intent that it was launched with. Now, this code isn't terribly bulletproof. We should probably do some null checking for intent. But what does it do? It gets the intent and says, oh yeah, what was the extra number? What was the extra int that was there? The name of that int is number. You have to give it a default value. That's what gets it. And then it simply doubles the number and doubles the number and displays it in the text. If we look at the if we look at the UI for the double number activity, it's got a text view where it is displayed, and then it has a button which is go back. So when the go back button is clicked, the go back method, come on. I'm sorry, I'm not using strings. The go back method on the activity is invoked, and what this does is it creates another intent. Right. It creates another intent that represents then the result of the activity. In this case, the doubled number. So I include both the original and the double. I set the result of the activity to OK, and I call finish on the activity that will stop the activity and return it to the parent. Yeah.
So I'm like, someone mentioned this on the GitHub. I saw in the code that URI was like not needed.
Yeah.
So like I found that I didn't really need it. So what instance?
I guess I don't need it. I was just playing around. So you would need it if the thing you were acting upon. So like say, oh, I'm going to edit an appointment book, and if that appointment book has like a well-known name, like maybe the owner name or something, I don't know, right? Then you would put that in the URN. That's sort of the if you work with other kinds of data in Android, like contacts from your contact list, or maybe emails. Even then, you probably don't know what they're. Contacts seems to be like sort of the canonical example that everybody gives. Then yeah, each contact has a nice URN, and then you pass that around. And that's nice because if the URN sort of has a standard shape, then all sorts of applications can respond to that intent. So I think that's the reasoning behind using intents. That's why they almost always have examples. But yeah, I think in this one, because I'm just passing it in the extra, it's not necessary to have the URN. Or maybe there's a better URN I could be using, but yeah. So let's walk through this again under the debuggers to see what's going on. So I'm going to start debugging when double number is called. So let's run the debugger. Should stop the other one, I hope. Yeah. Oh, that's displaying text from a file. We'll maybe look at that later if we're so inclined. Okay, so we'll put in a number of 5. Oops, put in the number of 5. Click double number. Okay, so because I click the button, this is the click handler for the button. So I go and I get the widget for edit text. Edit text. Sorry, a number to double. That's not very useful. So then we'll go get the text from that. Number string is there you number is string as the string 5. I then convert it into an int. I create the URI. The URI, I'll see if I can make it bigger here, is number colon 5. So the scheme is number. So this would be like HTTP in your URL, right? It's the scheme. So I called it number. You could have like appointment colon whatever the heck in your URI. And then a URI consists of all sorts of different things. Here I just have it from parts. So it's a scheme, SSP. I don't remember what that stands for. And then you can have fragment, which is like the pound, the thing after the pound. So anyway, Again, I don't think you're probably going to use it for this class, but the whole idea is that URI is meant to be something that sort of universally identifies a piece of information, and it's like a URL in that it's hierarchical, it can have a fragment at the end, good stuff like that. So I create the intent. This time the URI is null. I populate some extra information, and then I say, hey, go start the activity from the intent. And actually, then that's an asynchronous caller. Actually, well, I don't know if it's asynchronous so much as it's putting something then on the event queue. And so this is done. So let's continue there. Oops. Oh, I forgot to set a breakpoint in the activity. So sorry, I'll set one here and go back. So the other activity was started. Its onCreate method was invoked. It goes and gets the intent. I really want to walk through this again. Sorry. F9, F9, do this again. Now I'll double the number again. The number to double is now 10. I'll continue here. Okay, so it went and it started the other intent. Now the onCreate method in the intent is invoked. So I'll go set up the UI by calling setContentView. I'll get the intent object. The intent, it doesn't. Yeah, the toString isn't very interesting. Now I can go and I can get some of the extra information, the value of that number. Number here is 10, as I passed in. I'm going to go get the text view to display it. I'm going to double the number. I have to use fields here, which is a little interesting because the activity needs to store the state. So then once the user says, "Oh, go back," it can then fetch that state again from those fields and then send it back to the parent activity. And now let's see here, I haven't displayed the activity yet. So now I display that. I'll continue. So now the UI is displayed. It's populated with double 10 is 20. When I click the go back button, that's handled. When I click it again, that's handled by this go back method. Now I'm going to create another intent. This is the result intent for that activity. And here it's got 2 pieces of extra information, the original number and that number doubled. And I want to set the result of this activity, meaning, okay, the activity is done. Here's what its result is. The result is expressed with 2 pieces of information. One is a status code, so result okay. And the other one is that intent that represents the result of the activity. So this is another way that intent can be used. It's sort of sent back to the caller. And then I'm going to call the finish method, and the finish method merely dismisses or stops or whatever that activity. And it sort of pops it off the stack, and then it'll display the parent one. Okay, so now let's see here, what's in the UI? Okay, this hasn't been completely done yet. Now we're back in main activity, and we've overridden this onActivity result, which says, hey, listen, when this, when here and the double number, when we click the double number button, we called start activity for result. Well, now that result has been returned and it's delivered to this onActivity result method. And it has a couple of parameters. One is the request code, and that is the number, the constant that was sent here to say, oh yeah, this request is the double number request. And then you also get the result code, which was set here as part of the result, so result OK in this case. And then finally what's delivered to this callback method, this onActivity result method, is the intent itself, which is called data. Okay. So you have to have a little bit of logic here. Say, hey, listen, if onActivity result is if the activity that resulted, that finished, is the double number activity, and it was okay, then I'll go get the data out of the, I guess I'll get both the original number, in this case 10, the double number, in this case 20, and then then I'll set some state here on the activity. So this is something interesting. You can't just mess with the UI right here because it hasn't been displayed yet. Instead, I need to set another piece of activity state. In this case, a field called a message to display after resume. And I set that to 10 doubled is 10. Now I continue on, and then, actually, here, I'll stop here. So this now the main activity gets, its state gets initialized, and now the activity is being resumed. So if we look right now, nothing's being displayed because we've now killed the double number activity. We're going back to the main activity. It's about to be resumed, and so now I set the message field here, which just goes and gets the text and sets its value. And I say, oh, okay, if there was a number that was doubled, then I'll go and set that value to the to that edit number, to the number that you enter. And now I continue on from that, and now when it displays, you get 10 doubled is 20, and then 20 is the new number to double. So, I mean, some interesting things there about going back and forth between activities. Activities have state. Sorry, I didn't see that last week, right? It's okay for your activity to have state. Certainly your UI has state. But even, you just store stuff behind it, especially when you then transition in between activities. So even though you have intents to use the intent object to shuttle information back and forth, you still need to store that state someplace because the intents are handled before the UI is displayed. So you need to store that stuff off in state, and then on methods like onCreate or onResume, you need to populate the UI accordingly. That makes sense? Anyway, so that's how you pass stuff back and forth. It's 6:30. I've been talking for an hour. Let's take a break. Let's take 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll look at how you can test with intents.